Why do we grieve so profoundly during the holidays? We're all grieving something, whether it's for our lives before COVID, maybe the loss of a pet or a family member. It's something, a human emotion that we all share. That's why I think we'll really benefit from the advice and expertise of Dr. Birgitte Tan, our special guest today. My hope is that you'll leave here feeling a little more grounded this holiday season. Let me introduce you to Dr. Tan. Dr. Tan is an expert in veterinary oncology. There are only a handful of veterinary oncologists in the country. I believe there's less than 500. And having years of experience in veterinary oncology and being an expert in the field of pet loss and grief support are her superpowers. Dr. Tan is the author of the international bestseller, Seeking Peace, the proven five-finger method to thrive through change effortlessly. And she's also the founder of the International Childhood Cancer Charity. She is definitely not an underachiever. With great excitement that I welcome her today to share her knowledge with us during this holiday season when, it's supposed to be a time of celebration and joy, but many might be experiencing some challenging times, and there seems to be a bit of a collective worry in the air. So is that just me, or are you also seeing this?
Thank you so much, Dr. Tynway. It's an honor and a delight to be with you. That's very interesting that you notice that there is a little bit of a collective unsettlingness. And that is very true. For us, the grief specialists, we actually know that before even the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a grief pandemic. And that's because most people are not aware that they are grieving. And when you're not aware you are grieving, you cannot do the correct things to recover from it. Never mind a lot of things that we think are correct about grief are actually myths. And then so people who are aware they are grieving, they're doing things that actually make them worse. But grief are not only from the big four. There are actually more than 40 different causes of grief. And with the pandemic, that there is double to triple of the unsettlingness, the mental conditions, the mental health conditions, and the depressions and anxiety and the grief. And so it is quite palpable up there for some of us.
Yeah, and I think, the holidays come and you're like, oh gosh, I'm supposed to be happy, but I'm missing a loved one. And especially, missing our pets. It's a little less acceptable to say, hey, I'm really missing my dog. I mean, a lot of people just aren't as understanding, but certainly being a veterinary oncologist, I mean, over the years, you probably have helped so many people on their journey with their pets with cancer, and then ultimately many losing their pets. You must really understand that grief is so real.
Yes, it is very real. And sometimes, many times, the loss of our fur babies or scaly or feathery babies can be as or actually more painful than the loss of a person, of a human. It's definitely, there is a lot of guilt, whether from my own oncology clients or otherwise. Over the 25 years I've been helping people with grief, I noticed that there is a lot more guilt and also feeling of isolations when it's come to our to pet parents losing their fur babies.
I mean, I think we as veterinarians, how many times have you heard someone say, I can never do this again. I mean, I can never have another dog or another cat, or I can never go through this. And you think, oh.
Which is very sad. And that's back to the original things of people. There are so many incorrect informations out there on how to navigate through grief that people get stuck in it. And then feeling this pain for years and years, which is really, really saddening for me to see.
Yeah, just being an expert in dealing with people with grief, I think there's so many things that we don't understand about grief, and that there are so many forms of it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
people don't realize a lot of the time is many times people think that, oh, if I'm not sad, then I'm not grieving. While grief actually, the most common expressions that is actually anger. It's not sadness. Even people who has a loss of a loved one, whether it's a person or a pet, there is tend to be a lot of the anger coming along with that, because what happens is when people feel they cannot control with people, when we feel we're not in control, we get angry, and grief make us feel that we are not in control. And then the other thing is people think that, oh, I stopped being sad, I was grieving, I stopped being sad, so I must be okay now. While what most don't realize is grief does not go away on its own. If you were grieving and then you stop being sad, a lot of time it's either go dormant, kind of like those dormant infections. They go dormant, but they're still causing like these underground inflammations and affecting your life that way. Or grief can morph into other things in your life, such as physical problem. You are an expert in traditional medicine, and you know that how our emotions and can turn into physical problem, usually mysterious physical problem. Actually, in grief, it causes, it's kind of like almost put like a sunglasses in you and make us stuck in some other areas of our lives.
Right, and these things seem to want to really percolate up during the holidays. And why do you think that is? I mean,
yeah, a few things that make grief seemingly worse or feel worse during the holiday. And the first is the traditions and the gatherings. The traditions and the gatherings makes us aware keenly. It kind of bring us to our forefront of our mind on what's not there. I mean, if you usually have grandma bake pie for the holidays, and now perhaps the grandma's not there physically, or in the form of the anticipatory grief, you are saying, oh, well, you know, grandma's still baking pie this week, or mom's still baking pie this year, but you could see that she's struggling with that, and that alone can cause us to grieve. It's called it's the form of anticipatory grief. That is one thing. And then the other part, if we really think about it, holiday is a change in our familiar routine. We don't usually go, say, party every week. And now we have all this thing we suddenly got to do. And no wonder it can cause exacerbations of our grief as well as holiday blues.
You know, it's interesting, this whole concept of anticipatory grief. It's, you know, if you have a pet, I mean, their lives are so short, you know, compared to ours. And I can't tell you, you know, how many people I know, or even myself, like my beloved cat, older cats, and my senior dog Star, you know, she's going to be 14. And, you know, you think the holidays come and you're like, oh my gosh, is this her last Christmas? Or is this, you know, it's like, it's crazy, you know, how close you get to these little critters that, you know, have just unconditional love for us. It's just so different with them. And I think we need to support pet owners more that have lost a pet. And that's why I think your work is so important, and to educate people on how grieving the loss of a pet is different. And what would you say is the worst thing that you could say to someone who's lost a pet?
Well, some of the worst thing that you could say to a pet parents who's experiencing a loss or experiencing anticipatory grief because of an illness, one of them would be, it's just a pet. I mean, there's so many people, and that's what makes being a pet parent sometimes more challenging. People who are not as much of an animal lover, a pet lover as we are, they're like, it's just a pet, get another one. It's not just a pet. We know that, being pet parents, it's not just a pet. And like my kitty boy, Kit, he's my boy. He's my boy. And also the other part is somebody anticipatory grief, whether it's a loss of a pet or any cause of grief, is when people say, I know how you feel. Mm-hmm. We really never know how anybody feels. Everybody has different experience. Even if we've been through very similar situations, we don't know how they feel. You told me a story about you lost your cat before Kit, and you were devastated, going through a hard time. And
I think people feel this permission to say, I know how you feel, but you'll be okay. But that's almost like the worst thing you can say to someone who's really feeling that heavy, profound grief. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It's one of those things that people, we never know really what's been going on in other people's life. You were telling me, I lost my kitty boy before kid, Roscoe. He passed away. Now, I was working at the clinic and everybody is very caring. We have a very caring team. And one of the assistants lost her cat, also an older cat, less than 2 months prior. And she said, oh, Dr. Tan, I know how you feel. Remember, I lost my pet less than 2 months ago. I know how you feel. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. I'll help you get another cat. And I thought, no, you don't know how I felt. In the last 2 years, in less than 2 years, I have experienced divorce, cancer, financial loss, death of loved ones, being black sheep by my family, and on and on and on. And Roscoe's the only one who know me and who accept me as I am. And for me, losing him is the end of the world. You don't know how I felt. And actually, over the 25 years I'm doing this, 25,000 people, practically most people come in, they lost their pet and they don't have a lot of other things. But many, many people, once we start talking, they're like, yeah, you know what? True. This happened to this happened to that happened to that, and happened to that. And then now it's just all cumulatively destructive.
I think it's interesting in your book, you talk about how grief is like a fingerprint and everybody's grief is different. In that moment when you don't want to say the wrong thing to somebody, what do you think is the best thing to say or do for somebody that you believe is grieving?
One thing we want to understand is that grief and people who are grieving need space. And yes, to a degree, that's physical space, but even more, it's emotional space. And the second thing we want to understand is grief changes people, and sometimes it's very drastically. And that means people who love hugs and talk all the time, they might suddenly feel like they want to keep it all to themselves and don't want to be touched and don't want to talk, and vice versa. And so we never know how people, and some of the best thing we could say is, if you have been through very similar journey, then you can say, I can relate to how you feel and I'm here for you in any capacity, assuming you are able to do that in any capacity. And if you just not certain, it's perhaps it's a friend instead of somebody you talk to every day, then you can say, I can only imagine how you feel. Or if it's you might even say, I cannot even begin to imagine how you feel. And I'm here for you. If you want to talk, if you want me to do something, I'm here for you. And if not, then if the person doesn't say anything, just be present. In this society, sometimes we feel we need to do things and it's got uncomfortable, but people can feel you. People can feel your heart. HeartMath Institute study shows this. And so even if you dare and just be present with them and pay attention and send love to them, they'll feel it. And that's sometimes the best thing, a lot of time.
I think it's interesting when you're talking about that fingerprint. I think a lot of people don't recognize that one of the most common manifestations of grief is anger. You have to kind of sit back and look at those feelings and understand that there are ways to alleviate the blues that you might be having. But when they transition even further into like found grief, that you need to get help. Describe some ways you would help people like with the blues, perhaps, and then when would they know that it is spiraled into more of a grief that they need help?
Yeah, absolutely. There are holiday blues and there are grief. If you are feeling holiday blues, so it's just a lot of changes. You suddenly have a lot of things to do. We definitely can employ things where good self-care, get a walk in the nature. Last time I checked on Google, holiday blues tips, that things I come out with 32 million different things. And so you basically do things in moderations, listen to what's comfortable for you. That is with blues. Now, how do you know and what to do if you are actually grieving? So the difference between blues and grief is, if you are grieving with something that's just break your heart, to me, when somebody has a broken heart, it's a little bit like having a broken leg, and not to undermine the severity of your pain, but it's a broken heart. It's like a broken leg. Now, let me ask you, Dr. Tainwei, would you go on a nature walk or perhaps go take a bath if you break your leg?
Yeah.
Hopefully you don't, right? Hopefully you said, oh my, let me go to a specialist in the correct field. You don't even go to your general practitioner if you have the choice. Go to a specialist so you can get it taken care correctly. And that's something, the same thing with grief. If you got blues, there are a lot of things. But if you have grief, then that's something where you want to find a grief specialist and have it addressed. And if you're not sure, usually one way to tell is grief is usually there is something else is going on. It's not your life, you just feeling not just, but it's not from the holiday, it's something that you have a loss. Could be perhaps even an incompletely resolved grief from the past. One of my most recent clients, everything is beautiful in her life. She has a new baby and she has an incompletely resolved grief from her father's passing a decade and a half ago. And now with the new baby, that grief come back and took her over, and she said, oh my God, I never realized this, but now with the baby, she said, she's like, how I wish that my dad is here to see the baby and celebrate with us. And then the grief come back, because grief don't resolve itself. And so if you're not sure, then talk to a grief specialist. Anyone who is heart-centered will tell you, okay, you can try this, or yeah, you can benefit from help.
So where can people learn more about your work? I understand you're giving a seminar soon.
I am doing a free online seminar on December 7th, Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. Pacific. And they can find more information about my seminar on LinkedIn, on Facebook. To find more free resource, we talk briefly about the different myths of grief, as well as what to do and not to do on when people are grieving. All those are available on my website, joyfulrichesbeyondgrief.com. For the seminar, you can find me on Facebook, Birgitte Tan, on LinkedIn, on Instagram as well. And of course, feel welcome to connect with me at any time. The audience mentions that you hear me from this with Dr. Tainwei. As an honor to Dr. Tainwei and as a gift to you, I'm happy to provide complimentary consultation. Just call me, number 1-805-864-2002, or email me, drtan4grief@gmail.com.
Thank you so much. And we'll put all of those links in the comments and information about the seminar coming up. But I'm so lucky to call you a friend and a colleague. And just thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Let's spread the word so that people know that there are resources out there for people that are grieving their pets and whatever their life circumstances are. But thank you again for being here, and I wish everybody a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you, Dr. Tainwei.